Hello all, welcome to another endgame study of the Solving Other Studies to Improve Chess Calculation series. This composition was made by Martin Minsky, the German chess composer. It's white to play and to win. As always, I suggest you watch the guide so you are better prepared for the practice. Then the 10-minute countdown, the main one, will start, and I catch you back with the beginning of the guided solution. And let's go for the solution and correct first move is to go with the knight, checking the king, knight e6, check, exclamation mark. Okay, so the position I think in the beginning it's simple to understand. Well, we have two rooks facing each other. Of course, we are not going to take the rook because the king just takes back and next we can stop the pawn promotion from black, so we are going to lose. So basically here we have three candidates moves. So we have the knight that we already saw, it's the first and good one. Then we have the rook going to g1, checking the king, or the rook going to c1, trying to grab the pawn as soon as possible. So let's see first what happens if I go with check. Okay, now the king moves to f6, and as you can see from here, it's controlling the knight to come to help on the defense of the pawn going to promote. So we need to go there directly with our rook, but rook then attacks the other pawn, and when we take one, well, it just grabs the other, and from here it's not enough. The king is going to the center, and the rook is on the board, so this is a draw end game. So no chances for white to go for a win. And same goes if we go directly for the pawn. Here, well, black can have more than one way to deal with it, but the best one is to go directly attacking the white pawn. So even if the knight can come and protect the pawn while attacking the rook, well, notice that now the knight is also under attack. So whatever we do, it's going to be a draw. This is a rook end game, a draw rook end game. If you have some doubts about it, well, I suggest you review my series on the rook end games. But of course, this is not one of the hardest ones. Well, the rook is going in front of the pawn at least, so it's controlling the approach of the enemy king. So black is on the draw side of this end game. So the correct move, we finally see that it's going to be with the knight checking the king. Okay, now from here things start to get in shape because of course if you go with the king to f6, well, we just sacrifice, the king takes back, and then we fork it, and the king, okay, it can reach near our pawn, but of course the knight is protecting the pawn, so we just need to bring the king to help and then promote the pawn, and it's a win. If the king takes the knight, then the pawn will be unstoppable. So this doesn't work for black, of course. And other possibilities going, for example, to h5. Of course, this is even easier. So we directly fork the king and grab the rook. So the king moves and we grab the rook, and then we have a rook over the board. So we just grab the pawn, and we don't even need our extra pawn anymore. So the king basically has two options. Well, going over here, it's going to be a transposition. So let's see what happens if the king goes to h4. Of course, now the only good continuation is to go with the check, because if we go directly taking the rook, well, we just allow black to promote to a queen. So this is just a draw. The queen will control the initiative, and so we are not going to be able to do nothing besides avoiding a draw. And of course, if the rook goes again for the pawn, we have more or less the same idea. The knight will approach, but then even if over here we saw that when we took the pawn, the rook just grabbed our knight, and so got a draw end game. But over here, of course, we can see other possibility, which is to allow the rook to take the pawn. But as you know already, well, rook and knight against a rook is not enough. The rook will come to the center of the board, or else we are going to be able to protect it with if we try to shake it. So it's just a draw again. So over here we need to go with checking the king. Now the king needs to move again. So we get, of course, two possibilities more or less. We don't have many options for black here. And if black goes with g3, well, over here we just bring our knight, so we are attacking the pawn. The rook is not as important because the rook will move, of course, checking and then coming to protect the pawn. But of course now I bring the rook, and after a while I will grab the pawn, and of course over here it's different because black just kept the rook. It can't take the pawn, neither our rook, and then the pawn will start to advance without any options for black, and so it's going to be an easy win for us if black goes with the king to g3. So black goes with king g4. So this is the first moment. We are going to pause again, another minute, pause if you need more. What is the correct continuation from white for here? And we already have progressed something. So here the correct continuation is to check the king. Remember that back then when I told you that the king goes to g1 to g4, we get the same position because the rook will go to g1 again. So this is basically the same, but we needed to find first the checking of the king on h1. Why we need to check it again? Because any other move, let's say for example if we go with the knight as we did before, now it's different because the rook can check the king and force the taking of our rook, because otherwise the black rook would take our rook, so allowing the pawn to promote, and so we get a draw again. And the other option there is to go with the rook directly to c1. So if we go directly to c1, also doesn't work because the rook can come again, and we already saw that this just goes only for a draw. So we need to check again, and it's black to move again. Over here it can come again to f3, but we get this simple fork, so not a good idea for black, so it's going to be impossible. Of course, black still has the option to attack our rook, so we are not grabbing this rook because otherwise the pawn will promote, but simply bring the rook in front of the pawn is enough, because even if the rook tries to grab the other pawn, as you can see, the pawn is protected, and again, the king will come. There won't be any options for black to approach. We are going to control it. If the king attacks our knight, we just go with rook c4. So all pieces are working well together. The king will come and then help, and we are going to win this one for sure. So what other options over here? If it goes to h3, well, this makes it easier because now we can bring the knight and it will be the same as we saw before, but with the difference that we are now able to bring our king to protect our knight. So it's not possible for black to grab our pawn or reach a position where it can go for a draw, so it's another win. So instead the king goes back to h4. So h4 again, and it's us to play again. How can we progress from here? It's another minute, pause if you need more, find the correct move from white. And again, we need to see what is the correct continuation. Of course, going with the rook checking on h1 is not possible. So let's see what happens if we go with rook c1. Okay, it doesn't work. Why? Because black rook can come again very fast to the rescue. We are just seeing another variation where we remain with the rook and the knight versus rook, which is not enough for a win. And so we need to go and find that now is the moment to bring the knight over. So it's knight d4 attacking the rook, and now black is going on the move, so it's going to check our king. The king comes to g6, and suddenly black finds this very brilliant move, which is to sacrifice the rook in g5 and forcing our rook to take, because it's check, of course, and we take. And so now it's black to play. Black grabs the opportunity to promote to a queen, and what is the finally the correct continuation for white? This is just 1 minute, but please pause if you need more, because you really need to find these brilliant moves. This is what makes this study make the effort of our time invested. Good luck and find the next brilliant move for white to go for a win from here. And of course, there are some moves that pay our time invested on chess, and this is one of them. It's rook g3. We are sacrificing the rook. What an incredible move! How can these chess composers find these ones? Because going with the rook to the other side just allows the queen free move on the board, so it's going to be a draw. It will be impossible for us to wipe the king or not losing a piece against the queen, and so we need to be careful. And of course, just a draw over here. And let's see what happens with this incredible sacrifice, this incredible, brilliant move. Over here, the king can take the rook. The other option is for the queen to check our king. The only good one is to go with the queen b1, so we are now checking the king, which looks promising, but suddenly we see that the knight blocking the check is also a check, which would also protect the rook, and it's not checkmate because of course the queen can sacrifice. We accept the queen, the king takes our rook, but of course now the pawn is in a free ride for the queen, and it's going to be a win. And last but not the least, accepting the sacrifice just allows a fork and a finishing style. We are just going to grab the queen. The pawn will be going to be protected by our king. It's going to be promoted. This is for sure a winning end game for us. How can we find these ones? Well, working a lot on this. So, as always, I expect to find you in future videos. Bye bye, and don't forget to keep checking.